Yes, we have another announcement.
Netanyahu's going to be coming again to D.C. So Monday, his regular pilgrimage. So Monday night, 6 p.m. on, there will be a noise rally, probably outside Blair House, which is where he'll be staying.
In front of the White House. Where do you meet? At H and like 16th, like 17th? So 17th. Yep, 17th Street. Okay.
It's overrun by Secret Service, not DC police.
All right. Any other announcements? All right. 6 p.m. 6 p.m. Okay.
How about that UN?
Yes, anybody watch the UN speeches? Any highlights? We're going to be talking to Max about that. He was there, so he'll be, I'm sure, giving us a first-hand account of what happened and his impressions about what happened at the UN. So we'll wait a few more minutes. I'm going to text him, see if he's... I'm sorry? Yeah. Yeah, he actually spoke with Pezeshkian, so that should be an interesting conversation. And so did Azita. Azita right there. Azita Shahrazad. She's... Did I say it right? Shahrazad. Shahrazad. She spoke also in front of the president of Iran. She spoke in Farsi. I assume Max spoke in English. Now he met with him a couple days before you did. Yes. The day before. It was an event I was supposed to be at too, but I couldn't make it, unfortunately. I had to be back here for an emergency, unexpected emergency. But all right, we're going to wait a few more minutes and then we'll get started as soon as Max gets here. media at some level or another, I usually go to sleep with it and I wake up with it. And I feel like,
That's called traumatized.
right, it is a kind of trauma, but I feel it is like, obviously it's not the same trauma that people in Gaza are experiencing or people in other parts of the world are experiencing, so I don't even want to call it trauma. I feel so selfish to call it that. But it is vicarious trauma. Thank you, but it feels so self, kind of thing, that self-absorbed when you start talking like that. People say, like, what are you doing for self-care? Like, I don't give a shit what you're doing for self-care, really. I remember I was at an event with Angela Davis one time, and one of the young people got up and raised her hand. She says, I know, Ms., Dr. Davis, you do so much, and you're everywhere and so on. What do you do for self-care? And she says, She said, I take care of myself. So it was like, because self-care has become a thing, as opposed to like, if you need sleep, sleep. If you need to wake up, wake up. If you need to eat, eat, and so on. The idea of sort of like the self-care process becomes a process of its own and sort of forgets, like, it becomes about you as opposed to what the cause that you're fighting sometimes. And I know that sounds, the old thing with the oxygen mask, you put it on yours before you put somebody else's. That's overstated. Anyway. Instability?
You don't know when the other shoe is going to fall.
I think there's a lot of that. There's a lot of, what's going on today. It's like they just invaded Portland. Like, I mean, Portland. Like, I watch Portlandia. There's nothing in Portland. So the idea of Portland being a hub of crime and all of this horrors that he's talking about is just such shit, and shit piled up on shit and piled up on shit. I always feel like when I post stuff online, my wife says to me, she says, you know what, they're going to come after you one day. You know that, right? I said, yes, I obviously know that. And I think I have a plan B. So, I never expected, my plan B is I gave all my, passwords and everything else to other people so that, they have access to the things that I had access to. And, we're really thinking about getting a place outside the United States. And that's never happened to me in the 55 years I've been in this country. It never happened. I lived through all kinds of shit, from Nixon to Reagan to all kinds of crap, the hostage crisis, the this, the that. We thought this was like the worst that it could be. And I've never imagined it'll be this bad. So I know that people are really struggling with what's happening, and every time you turn around, there's a new thing being thrown at you, and so you're always kind of in this state of constant chaos and constant, yeah. So it's interesting, and I'm right. I'm dying to see the Epstein files. I'm so obsessed with those at this time. Yeah, exactly, and then there's that, right? We're all implicated. Now, how many of you think, I know that Schumer and Jeffries are supposed to meet with Trump tomorrow afternoon, to avert a shutdown. How many people think that a shutdown should happen? Should happen. How many think a shutdown should not happen? Wow, a lot more people. I would have expected more people to want a shutdown. Well, I mean, I think the cost is obvious. He's already threatened that he's going to fire everybody, and he's going to take advantage of the situation that people are out, so he's going to just take over the government, basically. But he's going to do that anyway if he wants to. There's nothing to stop him from doing that to begin with. Yeah. So you think a shutdown is worse for the Democrats or better for the Democrats? Bad? You said better?
I mean, if they get something, if they say, take something, but keeping the economy alive is probably pretty nothing to do at this time. Yeah, but you can't give up the values. No, you can't give up any values, but they've been giving up their values for what? 20 years now?
Yes, someone has their hands up. Someone is being polite and raising their hands. Yes, please. Can we please just kind of listen for everybody when they talk, if you don't mind? Yeah. Obviously. So you think there should be a shutdown? Allow it to happen? Yeah. Yeah. Shut down? Yeah.
We're very comfortable here.
Yeah. We're gonna convene a gathering here in a few weeks about the 2026 elections. I think there's a conversation that needs to be had around that. A lot of people who are activists tend to sort of shy away from electoral politics, but that's real. Electoral politics does have some impact on all of us, and therefore we need to have that conversation and not avoid it. The idea of sort of being in a democracy where you actually have to be active and do things, otherwise it goes away. It's not enough just to go out in the street and protest, although that's really important, but it's also important to turn that protest into action that is workable, that is actionable action, that is calling member of Congress, trying to make a change in the legislation. Yes?
So we live in Washington, D.C. Thanks. Hi, thank you. We live in Washington, D.C., and when people say contact your congressman, your senator, all of this stuff is really geared toward people who live in a state. And now we have a situation where our president wants to take total control of our state, our district. So what do you advise? Should we try to become part of Maryland or what?
What I usually do is I call the 4 senators and the congresspeople in Maryland and Virginia. That's usually my go-to. And they tend to, they listen to you. Not all the time they ask you where you're from. So sometimes you can just leave messages and or talk to their staff members. It's funny how often you can actually get through to a staff member. It's very frequent, which is kind of unusual, being that they don't have that many staff members, and yet they're able to answer the phone. And you can talk to them for as long as you want. They won't hang up on you. Like, they will listen to you the whole time. I've called Tom Cotton, I don't know how many times. And every time I've called him, I just give them an earful of all kinds of crap. And they listen, They may not agree, obviously, but they listen. And at least it ties up their phones. Yes.
I also think another issue is this administration and Trump is really trying to jerry-rig. It's not enough just to get out the vote and to vote and to get other people to vote and educate other people, because he's trying to gerrymander the system for a permanent Republican majority, and he's trying to do away with mail-in voting and all of these other mechanisms that, to make them sort of equal, and then that would just nullify any attempt through normal voting.
Yeah.
It's sort of like, I hate to use this metaphor, but, we have got to take a knife to the knife.
Yeah. Good point.
I have a question.
Yes.
So in Texas, they declared that they're going to have 5 seats, and they got 5 seats. It's already done. In Missouri, they declared they're going to have additional seats, they don't even more, and it's a done deal. In California, they're waiting for a referendum to get 5 more seats in California, and maybe the people voted down. But then there'll be the lawsuit afterwards, and there's a billionaire who's already saying vote no. What do the Democrats do? What do they do? Because they're going to be overrun by.
I mean, I look at what happened for example, in Brazil. Very similar. It was an insurrection that happened with Bolsonaro. Now he's in jail. I mean, why they did not do that here, I don't understand. They went through this impeachment deal and all this nonsense, and it just went on and on and on. And he should have been, they had a few years of Democrats. They should have indicted the guy and put him in jail, as they should have, just like they did Bolsonaro. So I don't get. I think the Democrats really have been a disappointment because they've been playing by the rules and playing fair and all this and that. They haven't been.
They're worried that if they do jail him, then he's become a martyr and this and that.
Well, I mean, who knows?
Everybody's talking about somebody, the Democrats, maybe ultimately, that's your comment. We shouldn't do that.
Yeah. Yeah. How are you? Good to see you. Yeah. Yeah. Agreed. Agreed.
I mean, really, the Democrats were just as bad on Palestine, if not worse.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, there is a case to be made that had it not been for the Democrats behaving the way they did around Palestine, around Gaza, we would not have this guy in office today. I mean, that's definitely, and aside from the fact that, you know, the Gaza situation and the Gaza vote was a significant part of that. Aside from that, the abdication of rules and attacking students and shutting down free speech and, you know, putting out one bill after another on anti-Semitism and grilling the presidents of universities and colleges, that paved the way for what we have today. Had they really kind of stuck to what I think a lot of us would like to think American values are, I don't think they would have been in this. We would have been in this situation at this point. So it's a really horrible, horrible thing that the Democrats should not be given a free pass on this because they're the ones that brought this guy in and they're the ones that gave him the openings to do all the shit that he's doing right now. Zionism is bipartisan. Yes, I agree. Yeah, there's that too, right? I mean, they have it all now, right? All the branches are under their control, which is pretty frightening. And you know, people are saying like, well, the Constitution, you know, this is so. The Constitution really, if you really want to think about, was set for this moment to be able to preserve white supremacy. This is how white supremacy is preserved, through the Constitution. You know, there was a sort of a stopgap, a way to fix what if it goes too far off rail, as it has, as they think with the DEI and CRT and all the stuff that was happening. This is a way to sort of realign it back to its original intent, which is to give, you know, white supremacists the upper hand in all processes. Yes.
Just to answer your question about Brazil and why it seems to me that Lula in Brazil had a lot more authenticity and popularity
Yeah.
and genuineness
Yes. Yeah.
that the rally
He definitely had the people behind him. That's for sure. Totally agreed. Yes.
So, I don't know about anybody else, if you haven't heard the guideline of church or whatever it is, that was a scary thing.
Oh, you know that's going to be a holiday now, right? October, I think October 15. What day is it? Is it October 14? October 14, they're trying to declare it to be a national holiday. Is he here?
There's almost 200 people watching online. I just wanted to
Oh, there's 200 people watching online, which we need to watch what we say then. Yes.
That was scary.
Charlie Kirk Day, a holiday. Imagine. I'm sorry?
The memorial, the masses of people,
Oh my goodness.
all the,
Oh, it was pageantry to no end. They even had a guy carrying a cross across the entire stadium. Did you see that? A big cross across. Now it did have wheels on it, but he was rolling this thing a la Via Dolorosa all the way across the stadium. It's scary as shit.
You know, Trump just passed a law that said, if you are attempting to form what's the name of the USA? What's the name?
Turning point.
Turning Point
Yeah.
USA. If you're attempting to have a chapter of Turning Point USA in your school, and you want there, then you're in trouble.
Yeah.
You're in big trouble. Shut you down. In school. Turning Point USA will be,
It'd be like ROTC.
it'll be worse. Religious are
Right.
Is that the baby? It is. I was wondering where I thought it was in the backpack. Let's see, let's see. Oh, that's the tiniest one. Oh my goodness.
It's so great to have you. Thank you so much for going through the trouble to come here. Please have a seat over there. Good to see you. Thank you. We have a whole bunch of people watching online. There's a couple hundred people online.
Thank you all for being so patient. I had to change a diaper on my way out the door.
So I'm telling you the online so you can watch what you're saying. I know you're very, very worried about what you say.
Well, it's good to know
That's
people
good.
are watching.
Yep. So most of you, everyone knows who Max Blumenthal is. He's author, journalist, blogger, and filmmaker. He also is the founder of Gray Zone. How many of you watch Gray Zone? All right. We love that. And of course, the author of several books, including a couple that we have here. The Management of Savagery, the 51-Day War, and we didn't get Goliath on time. They wouldn't send it to us fast enough, unfortunately. So we apologize. But you're here.
Well, that's the one.
That's the
I mean, that's the one that really sets the stage for the current moment.
Yep,
But
absolutely.
you can get it online. So.
I want to be able to sort of get down right to business. I'm going to ask you a couple questions, then we're going to have people ask you questions, if you don't mind. You are fresh back from the UN, right? You attended several meetings, including a couple of very high-level meetings. I think, obviously, I saw your meeting with the president of Iran, Pezeshkian, and did you also meet with the Colombian president?
I didn't. I met with his Middle East, the director of the president's Middle East desk. Name is Victor de Correa, who I didn't meet with him. He spontaneously appeared outside the mission, and so he delivered a press conference that we can talk about for a small group of us that were there.
Oh, very good. I know that that the Colombian president, once his plane took off, they rescinded his visa, which I thought was really funny because his speech was pretty incendiary. I thought it was one of, although it was a little rambly, but he made some really serious points in there. Can you speak about some of the highlights of the UN General Assembly speeches, some of the heads of state?
Well, you mentioned
And don't talk about Trump or Netanyahu till the end. If you want to talk about them. that
Yeah.
is.
Well, I mean, there were some hopeful notes and speeches. You mentioned Gustavo Petro, the Colombian president, who, I mean, it's questionable whether he controls his own foreign ministry. And in 2024, he issued kind of an executive order to block coal shipments to Israel, which is serious. I mean, he is trying to set the stage for international sanctions on Israel, and Israel does depend substantially on coal exports from Colombia. So, but he had then had problems. The boats continued to go, and they got into a legal imbroglio to stop the boats. One of the things that was said in the press conference impromptu press conference with his Middle East affairs director was that they're going to deploy the Navy to block the boats if necessary, but they've finally gotten the legal ability to do that. They're focused most immediately on sanctioning Israel, but they are the first country to begin the process for the Unite for Peace initiative of Craig Mokhiber, who is sort of a UN human rights whistleblower, one of the first and few UN officials to resign from the UN in protest of its inability to stop the Gaza genocide. And this calls for an armed international force to escort and enable aid, food into the Gaza Strip. Population is suffering from an imposed famine. Where is the army going to come from? Where will it deploy from? Which countries will participate? Those answers were not provided to us at this press conference, nor were they provided by Petro, who was with De Correa, and Roger Waters, who's heavily involved in trying to create momentum for this initiative, in the follow-up presser. And at the UN, what we heard from Petro was him trying to rally the so-called international community, or what's left of it, to actually join and to put a physical stop to the Gaza genocide. That's what this would do. I mean, for our whole lives, if you're my age or older, you've been treated to responsibility to protect propaganda about how the United States and its allies have this responsibility to stop genocide by using the military and the Air Force and bombing countries to save children, save the children of Syria, save the children of Bosnia, save the children of Libya, save the children and free the women of Iraq, free the women of Afghanistan. Well, now we're confronted with the real genocide, and the United States is providing the bombs to the genocidaire. And so you have basically the global South struggling to get its act together, and the United Nations unable to do anything, and then pulling the visa of the guy who actually calls rhetorically for concrete measures, which is why the United Nations, and I think we can find some friends on the right to ally with us on this next initiative, including from the John Birch Society, which is the United Nations should be removed from the United States and placed in a country like South Africa. It can no longer be here with this kind of meddling and control from the United States. So I also met with Masoud Pezeshkian, who is the Iranian president, along with a small group of anti-war figures. So people here like from the Quakers and other activists who are anti-war journalists from the left and the right. I mean, I don't know what you would call it, American conservative, but that kind of element. The Iranians wanted to involve a broad panoply of opinion, anti-war opinion, and they were much more interested in speaking to us than they were in speaking to, last year they hosted the mainstream media. Like you had these kind of, Men's Warehouse models in there who, like, I can't even remember who they were, because they were trying to speak, Lester Holt and Andrea Mitchell and these figures. And, Pezeshkian was trying to speak directly to Biden through them, because they still thought there was still some diplomatic possibility for stopping war. Now they're done with the U.S. government. They're speaking to the American people directly, and basically the message is, what can we do to at least rally the American public against the war that will come back, which will be more violent than the next 12-day war. In fact, Pezeshkian said, if they take me out, he actually forecasted a scenario in which he was assassinated. We have plans that are 5 or 6 steps ahead. We have planned for every contingency. And he actually narrowly escaped an assassination attempt during the last round. This is a reformist figure who came into office after Ibrahim Raisi died or was killed in a very mysterious helicopter crash, and came in basically promising a last Hail Mary attempt at negotiations, and we saw what happened there. He trashed Steve Witkoff, Trump's Middle East envoy and everything envoy, who's basically Israel's lawyer, and said he would meet with us in Doha and tell us one thing about how we were moving forward towards a positive resolution. We can get the JCPOA back on track. And then they go back to Washington and basically issues a declaration of war. And he said, we should have recorded these meetings just to show the hypocrisy. How can you deal with someone like that? So there's very little hope there. And then he was late for the meeting because he was meeting with Emmanuel Macron. who is leading the charge for snapback sanctions with the E3, the 3 European countries that were still part of the JCPOA. Instead of allowing them, the JCPOA, to be continued, they're going to impose even harsher sanctions on Iran, which have already plunged the rial to new lows. And this is after the U.S. unilaterally shredded the JCPOA. I mean, the hypocrisy is stunning. Every aspect of international law and this agreement was shredded by the European former colonial powers and the United States, and Iran has to pay the price. Israel's running around the world assassinating negotiating teams, the entire cabinet of the Yemeni prime minister, and Iran is being called the terrorist. And this frustration was very evident in Pezeshkian's comments. And, I said, I hope to see you in Tehran. And he said, inshallah. And I wonder, if that will ever take place, given Israel's propensity for assassinating virtually every leader. And Netanyahu now out there openly denying that he killed Charlie Kirk. So just one other quick thought about the UN. I mean, I don't think it's worth. I don't have anything to add about Netanyahu or Trump's speech that you all don't already know or have an insight that you don't have. But there's an interesting figure to watch, which is Mia Mottley from Barbados. And the Caribbean is a nation that a constellation of nations that is really fighting, has been historically fighting for sovereignty. Barbados has been at the center of that fight. Barbados has very close relations with Cuba, with Venezuela. It's sort of like this unsung diplomatic power, and Mia Mottley comes from that tradition of. It's kind of like a Caribbean Black liberation tradition, and we were actually was scheduled to meet with her a few years ago, but we didn't get our flight got delayed and so on, but we got to see some of the scene in Barbados. We did a Gray Zone show about it. It's an inspiring little volcanic rock in the sea. She gave a great speech and issued a thunderous denunciation of the genocide in Gaza. And she is a candidate to actually be Secretary General and does have a lot of support. So there is some hope there. But someone else who wants to be Secretary General is Rafael Grossi, who completely cooked the books on Iran's nuclear enrichment through the IAEA in order to further his candidacy and set the stage for Israel to attack Iran. And we've seen some leaked documents showing he's been collaborating behind the scenes with Israeli nuclear officials. So that's a dangerous prospect.
Well, obviously, the whole idea of negotiations has been a ruse, for Iran, as it has been for the Palestinians for many years. I'm starting to liken the JCPOA to the Oslo, where you have this ongoing, nonstop sort of thing that people keep listening to and thinking it's real, and it's the other side is not cooperating. Oh, the other side left out a comma. Oh, the other side didn't do what they're supposed to do. And of course, people don't know anymore. They just listen to what's going on. Do you see the parallels?
I mean, sure. It allows the. Oslo allowed the enemies of Palestine, Israel specifically, to declare that it was seeking peace, that it had negotiations, but there was no partner on the other side, so it could politically delegitimize Palestinian leadership as they killed all of the leaders, poisoning Arafat, for example, till they get to Abbas, and to put new facts on the ground in the forms of settlements, military bases, the apartheid wall, the siege of Gaza, all while saying, well, we're negotiating. Netanyahu might want 2 states, who knows? And it was the same with the JCPOA, that the United States had this great interest, but all along, Israel was infiltrating Iran with new Mossad cells. It was advancing its own unregulated, unmonitored nuclear capacity. Dimona is undergoing a massive expansion right now in Israel. And then Trump kind of lifts the mask on the whole thing, as he tends to do, which is one of the refreshing things about Trump. Like at the UN, he went up to Turkish President Recep Erdogan and said, you took over Turkey, yeah, and you were cool about it. Like, great job. I'm sorry, you took over Syria.
Yeah.
No, what did he say about Turkey? He's like, you know a thing or two about stolen elections. Yeah, fixed elections. So, I mean, yeah, in some ways. so, where were we?
I was-
So you get the point. I mean, and look at the negotiations between Hamas and Israel, how Israel has used those negotiations to make it seem like they're actually involved in diplomacy for the hostages, while they themselves actually kill hostage after hostage. Close to 40, according to Israeli media, have been killed. And then look at the way that the negotiations were used with Iran, the 30-day, I'm not talking about the JCPOA, but the 60-day deadline negotiations, where Trump essentially was used by the Israelis to lure Iran into a false sense of security, so that their commanders, their generals, were basically off duty when they were assassinated. So this is why last Tuesday, in a speech most Americans didn't pay attention to, that I think was highly significant in Iran, Iran's leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, declared that negotiating with the United States is a form of national surrender and no one should ever do so again. So my question to Pezeshkian was, does that reflect your position? And he issued a very general response to me.
What is your takeaway from that meeting? Do you see, obviously Iran is prepared for a possible attack. Do you see an imminent attack happening?
Yes, and everyone I know in Iran does, and the analysts.
What would that look like? Would it be, again, attacking the nuclear facilities? Would it be assassinations? Would it be, what would it look like?
Well, the one advantage or tactical advantage that Israel has lost that it lost in the 12-day war was if you look at how they constructed the opening attack, it was decapitation strikes primarily, and the secondary aspect was to try to cripple Iran's ability to respond with ballistic missiles. And they weren't even trying to cripple necessarily the command structure of the military. They were trying to cripple the upper level of Iran's IRGC leadership in order to inspire a national revolt. And they actually believed that the population would begin to take to the streets, and that Iran's leadership would be overwhelmed by the chaos, and that actually they might even have achieved regime change with this powerful blow. And the exact opposite took place, which is that large segments of the population were actually offended by the amount of civilian casualties and the amount of destruction that Israel was wreaking, and they rallied around the flag. And wisely, Iran's leadership, its revolutionary Islamic Republic, started to push nationalism, including pre-revolutionary, pre-Islamic Republic nationalism, to unite the public. And the public became very nationalistic, and it set back regime change decades. I mean, I just don't see that happening. So what I think it's going to be more focused on militarily crippling Iran, attacking, preventing its ballistic missile launchers from and the Mossad cells have been heavily crippled as well. I mean, they'd infiltrated Iran massively, but those cells really showed their hand. There were thousands and thousands of deportations of Afghan migrants who were seen as sort of a base for Mossad recruitment. So I think Israel's lost the element of surprise, but they're going to come anyway. And their strategy, as always, focuses on us. They could not have gotten out of that war that they initiated in June without knowing that they controlled Donald Trump completely and had him under their thumb, and he would finish what they started. And that's been borne out in transcripts of internal discussions between the Israeli military command, that they knew Trump was going to bomb from the beginning. So I think they know that. They have him under their control already. And they expect the United States to go in. But can the United States just go in with another Top Gun style raid, flying a few B-2 bombers across the globe and just hitting a few sites? That's not what the Israelis expect this time. It's going to be a much more violent conflict. I believe Iran has more capacity than we are aware of. They did more damage than we understood to Israel because of the censorship regime. And that when the U.S. goes back in, they will be expected to do more, involving the Navy, submarines, the U.S. to actually carry out assassinations. And if that escalates, well, the Strait of Hormuz could be closed, crippling the global economy. And then will the U.S. have to engage special forces, boots on the ground? Well, that's precisely what Netanyahu wants us to do. So we in the anti-war community here, we should be asking, what are we going to do? And we need to start getting the message out clearly that this is coming, and there's no appetite in any part of the American public for this except the 1%.
It's interesting because we're gonna ask the questions in a few minutes. It's interesting that if you were to say, why is the U.S. so interested in that region? Aside, of course, from geopolitical and also resources, right? And how much resources comes out of that is just think about what happens when you close the Strait of Hormuz. How the entire world economy goes to its knees. That's pretty wild, right? I mean, this is just a tiny, tiny little space of the earth that happens to have so much resources that come out of it that feeds up so much of the world. I want to turn a little bit to Stephen Witkoff before we move on. I think one of the least told stories, or a story that I don't hear much about, is his son Alex. They're real estate developers, and so Steve Witkoff goes and negotiates with top brass in all the countries, talking to emirs and sheikhs and presidents and everybody else, and then sort of softens the ground for his son to come afterwards to make real estate deals. This is insane, right? I mean, if you think about it, this is like so Banana Republic shit, right? So do you know more about that?
Well, it's the same thing Jared Kushner did.
Yes, absolutely.
Jared Kushner's
Absolutely.
company is interested in seaside real estate in Gaza. Jared Kushner was just involved in the meetings in New York with Netanyahu, and I think he'll be in there with Trump and Netanyahu. Netanyahu was supposed to do a meeting at a synagogue in New York tonight, like right now, with Mark Levin, his voice in Fox News, and he canceled it to have this meeting. And they're actually talking supposedly about some kind of ceasefire or end of war in Gaza. So that'll be interesting. But they're also talking about real estate. It's always about real estate. And Alex Witkoff was just on the Jerusalem Post's top 50 most influential Jews. But you're not allowed to be on that list unless you're a Zionist Jew. It was the top 50 most influential Zionists, and it's really interesting to read.
You didn't
It's
make it, did you?
No, I don't make any list unless it's like the top 10 anti-Semites. And because we're winning, I haven't been on that in a while because there's so much competition. But I mean, what's he doing on that list? He's the son of the negotiator. The negotiator? No, he's Israel's lawyer. There was a benefit concert and gala dinner for a group called United Hatzalah, which is one of the two pseudo aid rescue groups along with Zaka that went in on October 7th and cooked up all the lies about babies baked in ovens and beheaded babies, and they made a ton of money off those lies. Steve Witkoff headlined their last gala dinner. It was like 4 or 5 months ago, and Yossi Cohen, the former chief of the Mossad, also spoke there, and Witkoff followed Yossi Cohen, and he said, it's amazing. I'm speaking after a former Mossad chief. My mother would be so proud of me right now. I'm like, this is the negotiator? It's like every negotiator going back to Clinton is some Jewish guy who basically made Aliyah to Washington in order to advance Israel's interests. I mean, there's no exception. Can we, are you allowed to negotiate if you're a Gentile? Can we get some neutral, can we have a Unitarian or a Buddhist or something? So, but now it's just like the mask is off again with Trump because there's a material incentive where they want real estate, and they also want the Abraham Accords because that will give them, the Trump family and Trump Incorporated, everyone around Trump who gets to go to his executive club here in Washington, access to the vast sovereign wealth funds of the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. And the UAE, by the way, was the only ostensibly Arab country to stay in the room for Netanyahu's UN speech, met with him afterwards, shaking hands. So they're on board. Another relationship that I think is interesting to watch right now, relating to Gaza and relating to the future of our media, is the relationship between Tony Blair and Larry Ellison. Larry Ellison has contributed close to $300 million to the Tony Blair Institute. He's turned it into like the Oracle Institute. And so Tony Blair's the lobbyist for all of the techno solutions of Larry Ellison, which include like his data centers being hubs for mass surveillance, digital ID. Tony Blair's been pushing that since the COVID era, and now they're implementing it in the UK to further their control. They just detained George Galloway at the airport. This is an authoritarian regime there. And Tony Blair is set to take over Gaza. He's vying to be the administrator of Gaza after the day after Hamas is formally removed. And if you combine that with the plan that's on the table for the so-called Gaza Riviera, where ethnically cleansed war refugees are given a token, a digital token in exchange for their homes, then placed in biometric refugee camps, then given crypto to basically go abroad forever, you can see where this all fits in. Tony Blair is going to oversee a consortium of tech companies to carry out the final solution of the Holocaust in Gaza. It's all, and what else is Larry Ellison doing? Well, he's taking over TikTok. Netanyahu said yesterday in a meeting with influencers, we have to buy TikTok to stop young people from learning about Palestine and seeing pictures of all the kids I shred every day. And Larry Ellison straight up buying it in a consortium with Andreessen Horowitz, these venture capitalists, Mark Andreessen, who is pioneering AI drone technology, and Ben Horowitz. Who's Ben Horowitz's father? David Horowitz, one of the most anti-Palestinian propagandists in American history. And so they're just taking it over. Paramount, Ellison, David Ellison, Larry Ellison's son, has taken over that. They're rolling out a movie on October 7th called October 7th, which is like a straight up propaganda movie about everything that Israel wants us to see and believe about that day. I guess, no Hannibal directive. And they're going to install Barry Weiss at the property that Paramount controls in the media, CBS News. She will be editor. They've already appointed as the ombudsman an Israel lobbyist from a neocon think tank here called the Hudson Institute named David Weissman to basically stifle the news division. And a few months ago, many of CBS's 60 Minutes' hosts had to quit because they were being censored and suppressed. I mean, and this was already a show that was the voice of the establishment. So Netanyahu has been waging a 7-front war in the region, and we are now the new 8th front as the Zionist 1% seeks to retrench its control over our minds, and they're going to fail. All those institutions are fundamentally toxic that they're taking over.
I want to talk a little bit about, we're not going to talk much about Trump or about Netanyahu, other than the fact that when Netanyahu got up to speak, the entire, auditorium emptied, except a handful of people, as you mentioned, that stayed behind, which was fascinating. But aside from that, I think one of the most interesting conversations or speeches was Mahmoud Abbas, which I thought was very strange speech. I almost feel, and I don't know, you might not agree, but I almost feel like Mahmoud Abbas is actually a Mossad agent, who actually was they rescinded his visa from coming here to give him more credibility, so he could appear to be a real revolutionary, and he's out of the mainstream. So what he talked about was frightening, frankly. Can you speak a little bit about his speech and the implications of what he was saying?
I didn't watch it, so why don't you tell us why you think that?
I mean, the parts that I thought was, you really didn't watch it?
I wasn't able to.
Okay, yeah. Well, the parts that I found interesting is how he was saying that he will be in charge of Gaza and he'll be in charge of the West Bank, and that they're working toward a Palestinian state that's safe to make sure Israel is secure. So he kept repeating how Israel needs to be secure. The conversation was so lame and so just not a person who really would be a statesman that you want to have represent you. So I found it to be very strange in that way, and I thought, well, why did they rescind his visa? He said everything they want him to hear, basically. And I'm sure his speech was vetted by somebody and higher ups before he spoke. but it just seems like he's been controlled, obviously, by the Israelis, and is unable to actually say anything that is other than what the Israelis want him to say. And the fact that he was really trashing Hamas, the fact that he was really, going after and calling them terrorists, he's playing into the lingo that's been fed to us all this time. So that's the part that I found interesting. Where do you see Mahmoud Abbas in all this, in your opinion?
He has remarkable longevity for a Palestinian leader. I mean, everyone else gets killed except him. It kind of supports your theory pretty strongly, including Arafat, who was making enormous concessions, starting with Oslo. I mean, go back to Edward Said's essays on Oslo, which were actually banned in every bookstore in Ramallah, and he warned about what was going to take place years before, and he was isolated for that and attacked for that. So we thought Arafat was making wild concessions, but Abbas comes in following the Second Intifada and following a program also presided over by Tony Blair through one of his generals, Keith Dayton, to suppress and totally crush Palestinian resistance in the West Bank. The last resistance was in the Balata camp in Nablus, and like Dayton's trained goons from Abbas's security forces killed other Palestinians, and then began the era of security cooperation with Israel, where has that led them? It's led them to the West Bank being a complete prison right now, which is on its way to being annexed. What does Abbas have to show for himself other than the gilded prison of a few districts in Ramallah, which still get invaded by Israel? There's a WikiLeaks cable from 2009, I believe, by Hillary Clinton, where she declares we must not allow elections in Palestinian legislative elections. We must declare Mahmoud Abbas emergency leader indefinitely. I mean, and that speaks to his utility to Hillary Clinton, the United States, Israel, and he's still there somehow. Whereas Yahya Sinwar and that entire generation of Hamas just went all in to try to end the occupation, knowing they would all be killed. They knew on October 7th that they would all ultimately be killed. If Abbas is killed, it will be by a Palestinian, as Anwar Sadat was killed for selling out Egypt. But that's how good his security forces are, and the Israelis are part of his security forces. It was also kind of interesting to see Ahmed al-Shara prancing around New York. I mean, this is the former deputy head of ISIS and the founder of Al-Qaeda in Syria, who was treated to a fireside chat with one of the eminent analysts here in Washington, the sort of Harry Potter of Al-Qaeda lobbyists, Charles Lister at the Middle East Institute, which has a fine new building in DuPont Circle funded by the United Arab Emirates and the Gulf states. And then al-Shara, he just was off the heels of a meeting with David Petraeus, who oversaw the Iraq surge. Hundreds and hundreds, thousands of Americans were killed fighting Ahmed al-Shara. How do they and their families feel about Petraeus welcoming al-Shara into the community of nations and the international community, while Iran is branded as terrorists? It just felt like a complete upside down world. Actually, al-Shara met on 9/12 with the head of CENTCOM, the new head of CENTCOM. What's his name? Cooper. They had to wait a day because it would have been a little rich for them to meet on 9/11. Seriously. And so this is, the United States vision for the Middle East is perfectly, I think, articulated in this book by the most brilliant author in history, Max Blumenthal, The Management of Savagery. I basically tell the story of how Al-Qaeda has been constantly used by the CIA and US and UK intelligence to undercut their geopolitical enemies, Russia in Afghanistan, the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, Iran and Russia in Syria, and to advance Israel's interests. And so we see that all rising to the surface. There was also a meeting between al-Shara and Vladimir Zelensky. It was like CIA Tinder or something. And Zelensky's last really resilient battalion consists of neo-Nazis. It's the 3rd Regiment, which is the repurposed Azov Battalion, sig-heiling neo-Nazis sponsored by the CIA and the Pentagon. And those are our proxies. So this is really the moral beacon that we project to the world is Al-Qaeda, the Palestinian Vichy Authority, and Ukrainian Banderite Nazis to defeat our geopolitical foes. And I think, once the U.S. loses that mirage of soft power, then all bets are off, and any country is going to be willing to choose the alternative, which is military support from Russia and economic and infrastructure support from China over what we're offering. And it really starts in Palestine.
Do you think for Iran, you think the answer is to go nuclear?
I mean, I don't want to give them advice and get accused of material support, but it would stand to reason that if they had a nuclear test and had ballistic missiles ready with nuclear warheads, that would be the worst nightmare of Netanyahu and would not only deter an Israeli attack, would either lead to a severe Israeli overreaction or would force some kind of political process that I think Netanyahu, I mean, I kind of agree with him from an alternative opposite angle. It would actually start leading to the demise of the self-proclaimed Jewish state, and you would see a much more rapid demographic outflow of the Ashkenazi elite who comprise Israel's middle class and their sort of intelligentsia and their tech sector to Europe to avoid the inevitable. And that would, Israel has no way of negotiating, so what would we see there? But I really do believe, from my talks with the negotiators when I was in Iran, who were involved in negotiating with the U.S., and from the meeting with Pezeshkian, they really do not want to have a nuclear weapon. They do not want to go there, and they do really have serious religious objections to nuclear, to having a nuclear weapon. I spoke to one advisor to someone at the heart of the Iranian power structure who said that he actually went to the city of Qom, which is really the base of revolutionary theology in Iran, and he spoke to as many scholars as he could there about what it would take to remove the leader's fatwa against nuclear weapons. And they said we could remove various components of the fatwa, but each one would come up with 2 elements that could never be removed according to their understanding of Shia theology and the meaning of social justice. So that's where they're at.
Interesting. I want to turn a little bit to domestic politics. Obviously, with what's happening, all the chaos that we're seeing, we're starting to see some cracks in this sort of chaos that's being created. Where do you see openings are for this to take a different turn? I mean, do you see what possibilities there are? I know that there's a big article today in the New York Times about Marjorie Taylor Greene breaking away from the MAGA and really speaking about a lot of stuff, and I never thought I would retweet or anything with Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I've been doing that, and I find it really interesting that she has been a very strong voice speaking not only against the support of Israel, unconditional support of Israel, but also about all the other stuff that's happening here in the United States that doesn't feel like it's really the benefit of the American people. So I underestimated her. But where do you see the cracks are happening, openings for the peace movement and other people? And I hate using the word peace. I'm starting to use the word liberation because I think that's much more, on point than peace. Where do you see the openings for liberation from this stuff that we're going through?
Well, when my son was born, the first thing I said to him was, "Welcome to Zionist occupied territory." So.
Poor kid.
It's going to be.
He couldn't live a day without some peace in his head.
I just wanted him to know what he's in
Jesus.
for.
Anya, do you have anything to do with that? Or is it-
It was a joke, but it's nice the New York Times finally noticed what's going on. It's kind of interesting. Would you host her here for a Q&A?
Yeah, absolutely.
That would be very interesting.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I think like those.
Who would think that I shouldn't? Nobody. Who thinks I should?
I mean, you could ask her tough
One person
questions.
said that I shouldn't. Can you speak to that?
I just don't want the peddling of lies and conspiracies and to give up like over just one issue and get for years and years to be lying over basic things.
Good point. Good point. Yeah.
Well, I think there's like a dialogue that can be had, and then there are some issues that I just, with the right, where I just have to not agree to disagree, but I'm just not really going to engage with them on that. You really, I really get the feeling, especially since Charlie Kirk's killing. I've heard from so many people on the right that I never thought I would be speaking to, and people in the media who I wasn't that well aware of, lobbyist type people, like they want to talk to me, and they're just fired up about Israel. And I'm not saying Israel killed Charlie Kirk, although and Netanyahu denies it twice. But they are sick of being controlled by a foreign country, and in all of their media organizations, in Congress, on Capitol Hill, everywhere they go, they feel like there's someone watching them over their shoulder, telling them what they can and can't say, and they don't like the wars either. They might also not like the Mexicans and Venezuelans, but they also don't like the wars. It's just something they hate. They're fed up with it. They might have different reasons and motivations. And, through the dialogue, I think through the dialogue I've been having, some of them have learned a few things from me as well. So where I see the cracks, Andy, the cracks are between the American people and our ruling elite. I mean, the Democrats aren't going to allow us to have any democracy on this issue of Gaza genocide. The bottom has completely fallen out from the Democratic Party on the question of Israel-Palestine. Every poll that we see now, Pew, YouGov, Gallup, shows less than 10% of Democratic voters support Israel over Palestine, and a majority under 40 support Palestine over Israel, and that's just going to keep that going in that direction. So the last base of support that Netanyahu has in the United States is within MAGA. And outside of that world of Fox boomers, it's just not stable. It's falling out too. And most Republicans under 35 do not support Israel any longer. So the reporting that I've been doing on Charlie Kirk's killing, I think, has been a window into what's happening. While some people have taken it as evidence that Israel killed him, I was just trying to show the kind of pressure that the premier, most groomed, most basically bought and paid for conservative youth activist had in the final weeks of his life when he was pivoting away from being a Christian Zionist. And every day there were Zoom meetings that he had to have with figures close to Netanyahu in the United States, extremely powerful billionaires like Bill Ackman, who got the president of Harvard removed. And there was a fear there. Oh, he removed the president of Harvard. Is he going to remove me too? What are they going to do to me? How do I balance my own conservative grassroots who are sick of Israel, who think Jeffrey Epstein was a Mossad agent, who they all hate Netanyahu, and the billionaires who've paid for my career who are on these Zoom calls with me, and he couldn't do it. And then he's killed, so we never know where it was going to go. And they've introduced us to his replacement, who is the son of a Republican donor whose name is Bryland Hollyhand. Is that his name? Bryland Holly. Actually, his real name is Bryland Hansen, but he changed his last name to make it sound like Hollywood. And he's flying around on a private jet going from campus to campus. He's 18. He's pro-Israel. He wears like a PGA golf shirt. And He's being totally rejected by that movement. He's like a source of complete mockery. They're so done with that on the right. And Netanyahu, what's he doing? He's paying all the MAGA influencers he can, including like the worst, most vile racist trash, like this kid Cam Higbee, who went to a historically black college in Tennessee and was run out because he asked them to basically debate their own humanity as black people. And it was a clear provocation. He was in the meeting with Netanyahu outside the UN, the influencers meeting, where Netanyahu said we have to buy TikTok. All those young people in that meeting are literally being paid by Israel. They're being sent to the Gaza border to deny famine. That's all they've got left. So we're really moving to a point where we can demand concrete legislation, concrete action from our representatives and cause real problems in a national election at the DNC or anywhere else. And it's going the same thing. We're going to start seeing the same thing happen at the RNC that we would see happen on Charlie Kirk's like road tours when he would like be besieged by conservative Groyper youth who would ask him about the USS Liberty and he wouldn't know what to say. I mean, so a real revolution is happening. A revolution is happening globally. The ADL chief censor, central scrutinizer of the ADL, Jonathan Greenblatt, declared last week in a speech in Israel that 2.2 billion people around the globe are anti-Semites. Half the world, he said, half the world hates us. But you know, his idea of anti-Semitism is anyone who like opposes children being bombed in their sleep. What he's saying is actually a reality. And what we're seeing with the flotilla, the Samud flotilla, is another sign, a very late, overdue sign of a shift where Spain and Italy have sent, it seems like, naval escorts to protect them when they were attacked. Greta Thunberg was being bombed by Israel. Chief, like international terrorist Greta Thunberg was being attacked by Israeli drones, and an Italian naval ship and a Greek naval ship is now in the sea near them as well. Why did Giorgia Meloni send a naval ship? Well, she didn't. The Italian unions were going to shut down all of the highways and prevent food from being in grocery markets unless they did that. So something's happening out there, and we're going to see this play out in the midterms and in the next presidential election. We're going to see our leadership is completely hostile to our demands, and we're going to have more power than ever. So that's the crack. It's a bipartisan crack. Now it's a crack between the people and the 1%.
Very good. All right, let's open up. Yep. Let's open up. Yeah, I think we have a Ty, can you take the microphone over there? I think we have a wireless mic
Right
that we
here.
can take around, if you don't mind.
I got it right here.
Oh, she's got
Yeah.
it. Thank you, Madison.
So the first
Thank you.
question.
Somebody over there.
Can you raise your hand again?
Right there.
Oh, right here. Okay.
Congratulations on your new son.
Thank you, Mark.
I wanted to ask you, you didn't say anything about the meeting that took place between Trump and the leaders of the Gulf region at the UN. Huh? And so I was trying to figure out, and included Aragon was there too. So I was trying to figure out, at one point you talked about this new military arrangement with Pakistan and Doha. Where's that going to go in your view? And are these leaders really going to listen to Trump, or they just doing what? I don't know what they think is going to come out of meetings like that.
Do we want to take like two at once, or to make it quicker?
We can take a couple more. Right back there. You want to go here first, and then while you're close by?
Then we'll go to another region.
I've seen that Tucker Carlson, of all people, has sort of like he interviewed a while ago Jeffrey Sachs and came out in favor of the protesters at Columbia and at other universities. I mean, my jaw dropped. If you could speak also a little bit, you spoke about Marjorie Taylor Greene. If you could speak about where Jeffrey Sachs is coming from. I mean, I'm sorry, Tucker Carlson. Yeah.
That's definitely been a shift.
You mentioned all the polling that we're seeing and the cracks and how people are able to say stuff that you couldn't even say like a year ago. More people are using the word genocide. Do you think for the Democratic nominee coming up presidential, like, it feels to me that they're going to have to kind of completely break from where the leadership is. But at the same time, I thought Kamala would do that in the last election because all the polling was showing, and it almost felt like she would rather lose than criticize Israel or call it a genocide. So wanted to see what you thought if the Democratic nominee in 2028 was going to be able to shift and be more pro-Palestine.
I'll try to handle those quickly. I mean, with the attack on Qatar by Israel, the Gulf states, with the possible exception of the UAE, sense that no one is safe and no one can protect them and that anything can happen. And so in meeting with Trump, and Turkey as well, we see Israel threatening Turkey more and more. Israel attacked a base that Turkey was building inside Syria a couple weeks ago near Palmyra. They have been threatening. The attacks on Syria from Israel, like when they're bombing a site, that's a message to Turkey. So if they're meeting with Trump, a lot of it has to do with getting Trump to get Israel off their back. And I don't think they have a lot of confidence that he can do that when, as Tucker Carlson has been saying, Netanyahu is running through sources he has. Sources are a lot better than mine. I mean, remember, he's met Netanyahu several times. He met with his son a few years ago. I don't have that kind of access. He said that, according to sources of his, Netanyahu's running around the region bragging that he controls Trump, which is something Netanyahu said about the U.S. before. So there's a lot of tension. And Trump, they all consider him unpredictable. What will Qatar do to counter this? What will come out of this Arab summit that Qatar just hosted? They're the masters of hosting summits that in conferences and nothing happens. They're like, Palestinians mock them. The one thing I would always hear when I would go to Gaza, the 2 times I was there, is they would always say, where are the Arabs? Like, we expect the Israelis to attack us, but the Arabs are the worst. And then next on the chopping block is Egypt, because Egypt won't open the Rafah crossing, which is what Israel needs for the final solution. And I think there's a possibility of another conflict over the Sinai, as we saw in 1967, where Israel will actually try to de facto control the Sinai up to the Nile in order to create this space for the ethnically cleansed Palestinians of Gaza, which they intend to Judaize in their own words. So on Tucker Carlson, and I think there's more to your question that I should answer, but on Tucker Carlson, I think he's always he's always been sort of like discussing the amount of control that Netanyahu in particular has exercised, but he's found his voice because there's an opening there, and there's this new just opening in independent media, especially since he's now out of Fox News. But I think a lot of people on the left weren't watching Tucker in his last 2 years at Fox News, where, you know, there was a lot of stuff on the social issues that you would all disagree with. But the first 15 minutes, it was always about the war machine. And he was just trashing the neocons, trashing the war machine. It was the most anti-war content on any corporate network. And who began pushing for him to be ousted? Vladimir Zelensky in a meeting with the Murdoch family. So Tucker has always had this anti-war streak, and he hasn't been bought off by the Israelis like so many other figures have. So now he's just completely out with it. Matt Gaetz just hosted me on his show on One American News and just let me cut loose completely. Alex Jones, I mean, whatever you think about him, he's close to Trump. He has like that, he's that MAGA niche, and he typically was a pro-Israel guy. Like, how could you not have a conspiracy about Israel? This is funny. He had me on, and I'm like, I'm going to speak to this audience. I'm not going to refuse this platform. He let me say whatever I want about Netanyahu controlling Trump and committing genocide. And so these, and then there's Candace Owens, who was flown by Sheldon Adelson on a private jet with Charlie Kirk to inaugurate the U.S. Embassy in Jerusalem. She's now she and Tucker Carlson are now the biggest threats in the media to Netanyahu, and it's really just there will be more of this in the next months and years. I think we're going to see more major conservative voices joining their side. And on 2028, Ro Khanna wants to be the candidate who can come to Busboys and you know, get like us to like donate small amounts or large amounts to him, and he wants to kind of follow in Bernie's footsteps, but with a stronger message on Palestine. He's vying for that position, and well, no politician is sincere. But the question is he going far enough? He's someone who's been funded by Andreessen Horowitz in the tech industry. He hasn't always been very supportive of Palestine. He's just recognizing which way the wind is blowing. And there's no other candidate that I can see there. They basically have a bunch of Zionist Jewish guys running for president against Ro Khanna. J.B. Pritzker, whose family owned a hotel in occupied territory in Jerusalem, and Josh Shapiro, who went to school with Jake Tapper at a Jewish day school. Who else? Rahm Emanuel, who lost his finger in a kitchen accident in Israel. He wasn't actually fighting.
You heard it here first. Yeah.
It's true. I mean, he's like, I was fighting the terrorist Arabs, but no, isn't it? His brother Ari Emanuel is like a major Zionist operative who, you know, controls. Like he has so many people under his watch, including Dana White from UFC. I mean, these are like people that are going to be so roundly rejected by the grassroots, and they're going to try to rally you in any way possible and avoid this issue. Kamala Harris also has a memoir out that looks kind of interesting. I actually want to read it because it's kind of spicy. Like most of it is just trashing the Bidens and blaming them for her plight. And at one point in an excerpt I read, she trashes them for not speaking enough to the pain of Palestinians. And she said, is there any way we could do that more? And Biden could only say, I am a Zionist. Speaking about private meetings with Biden. But I mean, remember what we saw with Kamala was like, we feel the pain of Palestinians who raped everybody on October 7th. Like that's what she kept saying over and over. She was horrible on the issue. She was horrible, and her career has been sponsored by tech and the Israel lobby. So the fact that she's saying that in her book suggests she might even try to run again, and it tells you where they are. They're going to give you all the rhetoric they can. I bet you they'll even let a Palestinian speak at the DNC this time. Yeah. But it's all going to be performative gestures, and we have to get something concrete or walk away.
Yeah. There's two meetings that have happened that I want to ask you about. One is that Huckabee is in Egypt meeting with Sisi. What's the significance of that? Do you see any? Apparently, it's never happened before or whatever. Can you talk a little bit about what you think is happening there?
Yeah, I don't.
Is it to make arrangements for the displacement of Palestinians? Is that what this is about?
It has to be. And, you know, look at the situation Egypt's in. They're facing a currency crisis. Their population is exploding, and they don't really have any ability to care for the population because their budget their budget is shrinking. They have an infrastructure crisis. 1/3 of their, I'd say close to 50% of their economy is controlled by the military, and the military is funded through U.S. aid, through the Camp David Accord. So the U.S. has them basically, their economy under control. And they are forced to export gas and provide raw materials to Israel through Camp David, which the Egyptian population hates, which speaks to the level of repression that Sisi has to impose on that population. And now you have the possibility of Palestinians coming in, and what many middle class and upper class Egyptians would consider flooding them with a troublesome element that they do not like. How is Huckabee going to move him? What I've seen from Trump's diplomacy is he will tariff the shit out of you if you do not do what he wants, and he will attack your economy in a more aggressive way than previous administrations would do with sanctions. And I assume he's being threatened, but also being promised new aid packages from the U.S. And you look at how Trump's treating Latin America. Javier Milei, the libertarian with the chainsaw, just got a $20 billion emergency loan from the U.S. because the peso collapsed. I mean, what a fraud. But that's how Trump is treating his guy there, while Trump is basically bombing fishing boats in Venezuela because Maduro won't do what he wants. So that's the choice Sisi faces, and what do they want him to do? I think that's a great question. They want him to take in the Palestinians and facilitate the final solution, and Sisi has said this is a red line. And the Egyptian military, I mean, that's the last good, solid, standing Arab military that could actually do some damage to Israel. So I think something I think that the tension is simmering.
The other meeting, I think that's an important one to talk about, although I'm not sure it's being talked about enough, is domestically, is Trump meeting with all the generals. Hegseth has called all the brass from all over the world to come to this emergency meeting, and Trump is going to meet with them as well. What do you think that's about? It sounds like, if I was in Iraq, I would say they're ready for a military takeover of the country, which is not, I mean, it's already happening in spots here and there. What do you think is going on there?
Yeah, I mean, it's the military, it's 200 members of the military brass, right? I would be top brass. I'd be saying my prayers before I went there. Like, could be the Night of the Long Knives. I mean, they could be asked to take a loyalty oath. They could be, a number of them could be singled out for disloyalty and stripped. They could announce martial law on the United States, or it could just be a performative meeting in which nothing happens that's symbolic, in which they're trying to put them all on notice. And it certainly is a security risk, which is unprecedented, to put your entire military brass in one place where they can all be taken out conveniently. And for the American public, the fact that we don't know what's happening there is a perfect example of the lack of democracy and lack of transparency that we're confronted with. And I think everyone in this town is a little bit nervous.
Yeah, the part that worries me the most is the fact that it's happening around the potential shutdown, which who knows what that can create if it really happens, and everyone, as he promises, is fired. It should be interesting.
We should take more questions, but I have more to say about it.
Yeah, go ahead. Over there in the middle, the young lady.
Thank you for asking my first question. But so you think the implications of this meeting is more domestic than international with the top brass?
I would think so, because of everything else that the overall focus is bringing the war home.
Right.
The focus of expanding ICE, deploying the military and federal forces in American cities against quote unquote Antifa. It supports Trump's the Stephen Miller political strategy of keeping the U.S. in a perpetual state of emergency and shocking the American public and polarizing it in order to advance an agenda that only a very fervent minority supports.
Okay. The other question is about nuclear deterrence. I don't know, a few weeks ago, Saudi Arabia did this agreement with Pakistan saying that, if I'm attacked. So the agreement between Pakistan and Saudi Arabia, right, that if I'm attacked, if one country is attacked, it's the other one. Similarly, and Pakistan is a nuclear power. So does Iran have the similar agreement with Pakistan, and would that serve the world as having a deterrent instead of Iran having their own nuclear facility?
Just really quickly, Iran does not have such an agreement with Pakistan. Pakistani Prime Minister Shahbaz Sharif issued some very strongly worded statements of support for Iran during its 12-day war and offered support, and Iran refused. Iran is a unique country in that it really prioritizes its independence in every capacity. It is not in debt to the IMF. Its ballistic missiles were developed entirely domestically and rely entirely on domestic technology. Its satellites that it has sent to space, entirely domestic. Everything they do, their nuclear program, they mine their own uranium. So they pride themselves on being able to defend themselves independently and had not called on any potential allies. And I don't know what Pakistan could have actually done there, but certainly there's no nuclear pact. I think where they're really focused, Iran, is infrastructure, trade, restoring their currency, and if China were to help them with their air defenses, I think they would certainly welcome that. And Israel and the U.S. are leaning hard on China to not provide them with some of the air defenses that we saw in the brief India-Pakistan conflict do some real damage against U.S. supplied jets deployed by India in the initial day of fighting.
I have it over here. One thing that leaked about the Hegseth meeting was he just wants to talk to them about the warrior ethos. In other words, but that's consistent with this trampling of civil liberties. You know, they took down the nuclear vigil across from the White House with really no notice, and there needs to be pushback on that. So it's kind of consistent with the Trump approach. But I also wanted to ask you about the AIPAC pledge. Some of us met with Senator Angela Alsobrooks in Maryland recently, and we said, you know, you take $457,000 a year from AIPAC, does that affect your vote? And she said, no, I can say no to my friends, you know, and she did vote on the JRD, you know, the way we wanted. But what do you think about the trying to loosen the hold of AIPAC?
Well, you make a good point, too, about the Hegseth and the warrior ethos. That's what the military parade that we witnessed in Washington was really about, although they said it was just observing the Army's 250th anniversary. It was also about normalizing tanks and troops in our streets, which is something that they've been trying to do, and that's the longer-term agenda of ICE, is normalizing secret police, masked secret police in our streets. I was just watching the Washington football team, and there were ads for ICE, you know, offering $50,000 signing bonuses during the commercial breaks. I mean, they're not going to go away. So they're trying to cultivate a more pro-Trump, right-wing mentality that's more politicized within the ranks of the military, all the way down to the, you know, those who enlist. Whereas, you know, traditionally in the military, they would tell you not even to vote. On AIPAC, I mean, we should just be demanding that AIPAC be registered as a foreign agent. And, you know,
You sound like Marjorie Taylor Greene.
Yeah, exactly. So we need a FARA caucus with left and right, bringing them together. You know, we need to be hosting events at the National Press Club, demanding Ro Khanna sit on the same panel as Thomas Massie on the FARA caucus. And that's what we need to do with AIPAC. And read Grant Smith's research on AIPAC. It really illustrates how they were created by Israel, by the Israeli government. They're not some domestic force.
All right, we got, how many people want to ask questions, just in general? So we've got, wow, a lot. Are you okay with?
Yeah,
Okay.
we still have time. If you,
Yeah, we have time.
If you have time.
Yep. All right.
Thank you so much for the talk. Just going back to AIPAC, one of the things I wanted to clarify is other pro-Israeli lobbies. So I think a lot of people will vouch not to take money from AIPAC, but we know with the history of deceit that the Israeli government, the Zionist government, has exhibited. There are other ways of handing money over under the table or through other lobbies. So with the midterm elections coming up, how can we have a uniform way of candidates pledging that they will not in any way accept any sort of commitment or relationship with the Zionist terrorists? That's my first question. And my second question is, I'm Iranian American, but more than that, I'm a human rights activist, and I'm anti-war. And I think the only way to move forward for us is for the Iranians and the Arabs to come together. That includes everybody. And how can we really bring that up for everybody? Because I think that's going to be for the benefit of the entire world.
If you can answer that, Max, you're like, that's pretty remarkable.
Ask a Jewish
I'm
guy.
holding my breath as I'm holding my breath.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're dealing with members of Congress, it's just AIPAC. Like, they refuse the trips, refuse the money, and there needs to be alternative sources of money coming in. They all get invited on these trips when they're freshmen. and they all accept it because they don't really even know what it is, and why do they take AIPAC money in the first place? Because they don't know any rich people often, or they were like small business people in districts in middle America, or gerrymandered urban districts where they're just, and then all of a sudden some guy comes with like a briefcase and says, we're going to give you tons of money, and all you have to do is just take this free trip to the Holy Land, and when we tell you to do something on this one niche issue, you just vote with us. Why not? And a lot of the Republicans have this Christian Zionist mentality, but the Democrats are starting to realize they can't do this, and their children are openly lobbying them against it. There was a New Mexico state senator who went on that trip, and his own daughter accused him of selling his soul to Satan in a viral video. So that's great to see. I think we need to recruit the children. But it's really, I mean, there are other aspects, though, of Israel lobbying that are more present in the culture. The Israeli Ministry of Diaspora Affairs has set up several NGOs, like one is called Concert, and they pay media figures and influencers. One of the figures they got is Van Jones. He's like a vessel for Israeli foreign influence now. Former leader of a radical Maoist street combat faction in the Bay Area, inspired by the revolutionaries of Guinea-Bissau, is now like shining Netanyahu's shoes.
We used to invite him here. He used to speak here.
I bet he did.
When we first started. And wow, what a sellout. What an embarrassment. Anyway.
What can we do about that? We should shame these people, and the only thing we have there is shame. But with Congress, it's AIPAC that we need to focus on.
All right, let's take 3 or 4 more questions, because otherwise we're going to have to take a very long time. You want to go around, please, and just...
Okay, I'll do
Thank you, Madison.
Thank you, Max, for being here. Really appreciate all your insights.
Put the microphone close to your mouth, please.
Okay, here we go. Let me stand. Is there a political party or politicians that you sort of can say, those ones were the white hearts that you kind of espouse, especially because it's, everything is always messy and bad, but then when it comes to the war, it's like both sides it's like the best of all evils of both sides. And then another question is, I'm following the James Comey indictment. I wonder if Israel or Netanyahu factors into that power dynamic, or if there's anything that you can add into that. I know it's
Which power dynamic, sorry?
The whole indictment that is coming down on James Comey by the DOJ, and how maybe there's an influence into that. And I don't know if there's a relationship in there or any partner. I don't know. It's just something. Yeah.
What is the I didn't understand what you're talking about, the DOJ.
The James Comey.
Oh, James Comey.
Oh, James Comey. I see. Got it.
Comey and John Bolton might go down soon. And who else?
Right.
Right. John Brennan. Clapper. Brennan. It's like getting Capone on tax evasion.
Right.
I'm from Fredericksburg, Virginia. My girlfriend and I, we own a business out there, and we try to facilitate opportunities for people to kind of get into activism. And I think that, one of the main things that we're talking about in this room right now is obviously like the awakening of the really inappropriate relationship that we have with Israel, and the influence that they have in kind of circumventing the representation that all Americans deserve. But I think one of the things that I've been really struggling with to try to get other people on board, because in order to push back on that, we need to have like a real movement as massive as we can possibly get it. And Fredericksburg is an extremely liberal town, okay? And there's a lot of old Democratic money there. And when you're trying to have these conversations with them, and you're talking about this influence of Israel, they kind of get caught up with, well, we don't want to go into the trope that Jews are controlling everything. And it's like, obviously that's not the conversation. But I would be really interested to get your take on how people who are trying to get this movement that kind of hits that wall when people are kind of getting queasy, when you're trying to like really talk about the real thing that's like unfolding in front of us. but try to find some effective ways to get around the trope and try to focus on the facts of what we are seeing develop in front of our eyes.
Did we want to take more?
Yeah, let's take a couple more and then we'll go.
Thank you. So I'm actually from Qatar, and I second what you said. We are masters of hosting summits and it's okay. Statements of condemnations.
You're like actually a Qatari
I'm
citizen?
from Qatar. Yes, I'm a Qatari.
Wow.
Yes. So I second what you said. I absolutely approve. So my question is, we've been kind of watching the revolutions happening around the world, whether it's, in Palestine and here, also like in Nepal, in Indonesia with overthrowing the power structure. In Nepal, I think they voted for a PM through Discord, or I think it was Discord, yeah. So when I look at all these movements around the world, I think to myself, what is missing in the US in the more revolutionary or like anti-war movements that makes politicians skip sleep at night? Because in my opinion, I don't think they give a damn. Although they do perceive the threat, they know it exists, but at the same time, it's not enough for them to take enough action to say, okay, embargo on like weapons, we're gonna like keep our support more conditionals, more actionable stuff that their constituencies want to see. So like, what is it exactly missing about the movement? I'm not saying they have to be more violent. Maybe I am, I'm not sure. But at the same time, like, what is it missing in your opinion that would lead politicians to take more actions on the matter?
Okay, I think that's enough. You want to take some of these?
Yeah, you're gonna have to help me.
On
so we had
on what's missing. What's missing in the United States that doesn't?
that Comey and
The one about Comey and the tropes.
okay.
About the tropes.
And did you wanna
running
do-
against anti-Semitism tropes.
So we did 3.
Yeah, we
We
did
can do
3. So the
another if you
Comey, the
want.
tropes, and what's missing in
Let's
the
do
U.S.
that one right here.
Let's take that one too. Or you have, it doesn't matter wherever
don't-
you
you
are.
don't need a
Sorry,
mic.
Madison.
Making you work here.
Thank you, Max. I'm the second Iranian American here.
She spoke also with
Pezeshkian.
Pezeshkian.
I actually asked for the nuclear deterrence openly. Anyway, for the Saudis, the nuclear pact between Saudis and Pakistan, I'm afraid more aiming Iran and Yemen, because we know the Saudis and Emirates working with the Israeli underneath and supporting the genocide in Palestine. And the Yemenis threaten Emirates and Saudis few times. And the Aramco, the oil facilities, of course, they are not going to be attacked by US. So the attack coming from Yemen, and the Saudis, so much money goes to the military of Pakistan and financial aid and so many things. Don't you think so that pact is for the future securing the oil and the whatever going to happen in Saudis or Emirates through the Pakistani nuclear pact deal?
Should we take those?
Yeah.
Can you just? Sorry, Can you recapitulate them?
Sure.
to me?
The Comey,
Yeah. What was the last one again?
the one that Azita
Yeah.
just said.
Yeah.
The nuclear pact between Pakistan and Saudis aiming towards Iran and Yemen.
Well, all those countries that have U.S. bases, including Qatar, are engaged in a protection racket. And it's that the U.S. will protect their oil fields and protect their monarchy against their own population and against the resistance forces in the region. And they'll let the U.S. just be there, put a target on their back, and exploit them. And that's breaking around Yemen, as we see Yemen actually defeated the United States. Ansar Allah actually defeated the United States in a standoff. Israel has no way of breaking the resistance. And what Mohammed al-Bukhaiti, who is the spokesman for Ansar Allah, told me in one of our 3 interviews is that our victory will expose the fraud of the relationship between the other Gulf states and the U.S., and it will expose the protection racket as not protecting them at all, because the U.S. and its Israeli attack dog will come for them anyway. The United Arab Emirates is heavily involved, as you said, in the Gaza genocide. I remember under the Biden administration, at Tony Blinken's last talk at the Atlantic Council, I was outside and all these Emirati guys were flowing out of there. And I'm like, I tried to ask them, like, what are you working on, like, with him? What are you planning? And and of course they wouldn't talk to me. And Axios reported that Blinken was putting forward a plan for the day after in Gaza with the United Arab Emirates. And who was lobbying for the UAE all these years on behalf of JP Morgan? It was Tony Blair. He was like, the Emiratis have been paying the Tony Blair Institute. So Tony Blair's going to come in and work with the Emiratis to basically help Israel take over there. And the Emiratis face potential repercussions for that. So James Comey, I don't see any connection between anything we've been talking about and James Comey, except that Trump is being extremely vindictive and seeking to wage lawfare against those who waged lawfare against him. He's getting revenge for lawfare, in this case through the Russiagate hoax, which James Comey oversaw. And like, James Comey is one of the more sinister figures in American life. I have no sympathy for him at all. I would love to see John Brennan go down along with the entire CIA scattered to the wind in 1,000 pieces, but he's not going to go down for one of the real crimes he committed. For example, overseeing the arm and equip program that put arms in the hands of ISIS and Al-Qaeda fighters in Syria to carry out atrocities, nor will John Bolton go down for overseeing coups and assassination attempts that he freely boasts of. He'll go down for classified documents. I mean, what a weird town. And then if, Gavin Newsom gets in there, or J.B. Pritzker, or who knows, then all the, like, Trump's people are all going to be on trial. What did you have? Tom Homan, the border czar, it took a bag full, $50,000 bag of cash from an undercover FBI agent, and Trump says he did nothing wrong. I mean, none of them are going to go down for any of the real crimes. So it really speaks to the absurdity and theatrical clown car of Washington.
But I think part of it is the scorched earth approach that Trump is taking here is further proof that he's not planning on not being here for a long time.
No, I think he is trying to establish a kind of regime.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think it's going to be. It worries me because he is so completely gone ballistic with these folks that he knows that if they take over, is going to turn on him. So he has no plans to turn this over to anybody else. I mean, that's what it feels like right now.
I mean, I don't think we will be in a situation where Trump just simply refuses to leave office and the military deploys and they declare martial law if he loses an election. But they'll try to, and I think previous presidents have stolen elections too in our lifetime. Yeah. I think he will try to steal the election, and the gerrymandering is an attempt to basically, in so many ways, steal the midterms. Legitimize the theft. And so they're going to try to do it the American way. But they're doing it so nakedly.
Okay.
I mean, but Trump faced lawfare in his first term that I thought was based on false premises. We called it out at the gray zone and got attacked by so many people on the left. I remember the Young Turks were coming at us. It was like a Turk attack like every day because we were questioning Russiagate and saying it was setting the stage for a war with Russia. And now Trump is getting his revenge. And, I think we're just going to see these cycles of revenge until whatever fantasy of democracy we had is completely ground down into a Machiavellian power struggle. On the question of revolution and Nepal, know what to think of Nepal, and it's not necessarily inspiring that a bunch of young people were triggered into a revolutionary frenzy by social media, because that's what happened in Ukraine in 2014. That's what happened during the color revolutions. The Arab Spring it didn't exactly end up well. I look at it as kind of like partly like a Qatari influence operation with support from the CIA that wound up with even harsher regimes in power and weaker. So, and what I saw happen here starting in 2020 was not exactly revolutionary. I supported the message of Black Lives Matter early on just because growing up in DC, like, I hated the cops. Like, they just mistreated us anytime we went out, or if I had a black person in my car, they would just harass me. It was horrible. I just never felt, and so I'm like, we need reform. Every day in high school here in DC, there was a day against police brutality, and a bunch of us would show up wearing black, and it was always a Tuesday. And like, that's what I wanted it to be about. And then it became about eradicating something very abstract with tons of money coming in from the same foundations that are paying for those color revolutions, those neoliberal, anti-communist, anti-China, anti-Russia color revolutions abroad. Soros, the Ford Foundation, millions and millions of dollars, and then they paid all of the leaders to go home and become community activists to turn them into the next Obama. And I saw complete nihilism take place towards the end, where there were like people just like burning trash cans in the street. And I didn't even know what they were fighting for by the end. And it really felt like something hopeful or positive had just been completely co-opted and taken in a dark direction after it was useful to the Democrats. Because remember, BLM was about, they tried to just turn it into something anti-Trump. And then, on the Trump side, I mean, they basically, it was like the gangs of New York. Like, you had like Antifa fighting for the Democrats, and the Proud Boys were basically the Republican street wing. And they just go out and have these like sharks and jets fights. It just felt so hopeless to me, and I really don't want to go back into a scenario like that, but that's where the forces in the security state are taking us now. And so we should learn about the years of lead in Italy, the strategy of tension that was deployed in Italy by NATO, by the CIA, by the Italian security services to polarize the population through acts of terrorism, often false flags like the Milan cafe bombing in 1969, the killing of Prime Minister Aldo Moro after being kidnapped by Red Brigades who were actually being run by the security services in 1979. It was all to make people so afraid of anything revolutionary or even reformist that they would move to the center and hug the security state to protect them. And that's what the Trump administration is doing right now. That's what, I mean, I really question all these shootings where everybody decides to write something on the bullet that spells out what their exact agenda is, and it happens to line up exactly with what Trump wants to demonize. And I'm surprised, like, with the skepticism of the American public, they're not really going along with it, but they want to militarize us and impose martial law, and they need these events to shock us. So what we need to do first, before we can even explore any positive revolutionary momentum, is what they're trying to do to us, and to resist it and resist, I think, adventurous violence is what they want, particularly from the left right now. And then your question on anti-Semitism. It should be easy to answer, but right now it's really hard to cope with or to counteract anti-Jewish attitudes, because you have this psychotic state that has the flag with the symbol of my faith community in the middle of it, slaughtering children every day, putting up like gigantic Hanukkah candles in destroyed neighborhoods, sending soldiers with Torah scrolls into like destroyed homes and putting it all on TikTok. They're like proudly destroying Judaism. The whole reputation of Judaism has been obliterated. It's gone. I mean, it has to be rebuilt from the ashes. And there's almost nothing I can do to try to convince some Gentile who didn't like go to bar mitzvahs at their school growing up and wasn't around Jews that we're like, actually there's some of us that are good, because that's all they see. It's really hard to do. And then you have another generation that, they're afraid of talking about it. That's what the new South Park episode is about. Have you seen that? Watch the new South Park episode. It's interesting. Basically, what is it, Cartman? Who's the Jewish kid? Cartman is the Jewish kid. Kyle. So Kyle's mom, they basically, there's like a poly market bet on whether she will actually go to Gaza and commit genocide because she's Jewish, and they're like the one Jew in town, and everyone now suspects the Jews of being genocidal, and she doesn't know that, and like all the kids are trying to game it by trying to get her to do it, and then she finds out, and she realizes she's become an object of suspicion, but her friends who want to be, middle-class Gentiles were afraid to tell her they suspected her of wanting to kill Palestinians. So when she finds out, she goes to Jerusalem, and everyone thinks they're going to win their bet because she's going to commit genocide, but instead she storms into Netanyahu's office and said, "It's your fault. You have destroyed the reputation of Jews. How dare you? By flattening neighborhoods and slaughtering children, you've destroyed our religion." So, I mean, even like a franchise like South Park is kind of saying it. I don't think Jews are the ultimate victim here. But what you would need to do, I think, and what we need to do in these kind of conversations with people is refocus on Zionism and explain the logic of Zionism and how it is dissimilar from Judaism, how many Jews don't support it, how many ultra-Orthodox Jews have traditionally rejected Zionism, and how Zionism has captured Judaism and has captured all of our communal institutions. I mean, basically every synagogue in DC supports Zionism in one form or another, so it puts us out in the political wilderness. But the logic of Zionism, it is a political movement founded by Theodore Herzl, who offered the Pope the ability to convert all of Europe's Jews to Catholicism. That was his initial attempt to save the Jews of Europe. Theodore Herzl had he was a complete atheist. He had a Christmas tree in his house. I mean, my wife likes Christmas trees, so whatever. But I went to synagogue more than Herzl did. David Ben-Gurion, same thing, the first prime minister. Zionism is like a secular messianic movement that is now basically satanic, that has enveloped Judaism, and it's important to address the logic of Zionism. And here's one point I would make about it in closing. Zionism needs anti-Semitism as its fuel to survive. It needs people to hate Jews. So when Jonathan Greenblatt, the chief censor of the ADL, says 2.2 billion people in the world hate us, that's a declaration of victory. It needs it because it justifies, quote unquote, Israel as a fortified sanctuary for all the world's Jews, when in fact it's the most dangerous place for Jews to be in the world. So they encourage it, and they need to convince Jews to leave, to make aliyah, which means going up. And how can they convince them to leave? By wrecking their societies. That's why, do you remember at the beginning of Trump's first term when there were thousands of phone calls to Jewish community centers and threatening them with bomb threats, and it caused mass panic? Yeah, who made those phone calls? It was an Israeli kid, and his identity was hidden from us after he was caught and quietly prosecuted in Israel. They're making these phone calls in Australia too, and the Australian state security quietly identified him, swept it under the rug. Everyone thought it was like right-wing Nazis in our country. So they continue to do this, and they continue to do it in Australia. Did you see that? They had this whole bout of anti-Semitism, synagogues being burned and so on. It turned out someone from abroad was paying criminals to do this. And in the end, with no evidence, they blamed Iran when only one country benefits from it. So this is the logic of Zionism. The logic of Zionism is to obliterate the Jewish world and force it all into this fortified, psychotic, messianic, satanic colony so they can, destroy our brains. And we're not going to, there's more of us that won't let it happen than before.
And on that happy note, we're going to end this conversation. Thank you so much, Max.
All right,
Blumenthal.
thank you.
This was recorded, so it's online. You can look it up on our YouTube channel at Busboys and Poets. And if you don't mind, you want to sign some books? Is that okay?
Sure. If someone gets me a beer.
I'm sorry?
If someone gets me an IPA, I can
do that.
IPA
coming.
Thank you, Andy, for
All right,
doing
thank you so much.
Palestine Week. Everyone give a hand to Andy.